Today we find out if there are any better guillotine blade designs than the regular 45 degrees. We have made the needed upgrades to our guillotine and this time the results are clear. I've also made a more exact measuring setup to test your blade designs, and we put some household objects under the big guillotine to get a feeling for its actual strength, because do you know how strong this is? I surely don't. As many of you pointed out, our rotation problem would be fixed with a longer carriage. So I made a new mounting plate and Jon from Proper Printing made some new wheel holder thingies. Our beams weren't perfectly straight, which also created more wobble than we wanted. We made some blocks with a V that could sit outside the frame so we could pull it together with a ratchet strap without getting in the way of the carriage. That worked like a charm and the carriage ran tightly. Another thing many of you pointed out is that the mats weren't held in place, so I made a lunette, simply wedged under two pieces of wood.
That ain't going anywhere.
It had two small slots to prevent it from moving sideways. We did a first tryout with the 45 degree blade to see if the lunette works, and it does, but we decided to roll the mats more tightly and put tape around it to act like some kind of skin to keep it all together. There are still no bones inside, but as you'll see, the results are pretty clear regardless. Now, for the actual test. First up is the 45 degree blade from 1 meter.
2, 1.
It just goes through. From 90 centimeters? It does not, although it was very close. And from 95? No. So we tried 1 meter again. And it doesn't go through. This scared us a little bit about the consistency of our testing setup, but we just followed the script. So 105. It looks very nice. The slab that's peeled off, but it's not all the way through again. So we go to 110. And we will count this as a completed cut. And as you'll later see with the other results, the 10 centimeter difference from the first cut is really nothing to speak of, just a fluke. But one interesting thing to note is that the wheels on one side of the carriage spin freely, while the other side is stuck. I believe this is because our blade is sharpened from two sides instead of from one side. This doesn't matter if the material can move out of the way, but of course we have one side tied down. On the small scale model, we will test the difference between a one-sided and a two-sided blade. We moved to the sun because we needed a lot of light for the high-speed camera and the shadows were creeping up on us. Second up is the flat blade. Last time the flat blade performed just as good, if not better, than the other blades. So from 1 meter.
3, 2, 1. What the fuck?
What?
We were shocked, not as much as a dent. After checking sharpness, 1 meter again, with similar results. 120. A small cut. 160.
What the fuck?
This but a scratch. 180, which is as far as we can go because of the longer carriage.
3, 2, 1.
Half-ish? So we tried mounting an extra blade upside down just for the extra weight.
Hey!
And it finally made it through, with extra weight from the maximum height. That's really quite bad. And to be clear, this is not because the flat blade got worse. Last time we used about 7 meters of tatami mats in a roll, while this time it's around 14 meters with a tape skin. So the 45 degree blade is just cutting a lot better. Alright. Pointy blade from 1 meter. Nope. 120. Still not, but it's an easy push.
So clean.
125.
You can see the outline of the knife moving through. This is such a cool shot.
Only 3 strands left, so we count that as going through. Notably, that's a little bit worse than the 45 degree blade. So we tried that one again because we changed position and stuff, but similar results, somewhere between 110 and 120. They seem to be performing very similar. Then the 30 degree blade from 120. And it didn't go through. And even from 160. Nope.
To the max!
and from 180 there was only a sliver left. We didn't bother mounting an extra blade to it because it would tell us very little. We already know from this that it's a lot worse.
Nou, bekruisterkroon.
Time for the
Bekruisterkroon tab.
We needed some small changes to the lunette because we wanted to give the Berkisterkrone its best chance by starting from a steep part. From 1 meter.
Good.
Not even close. So we just went to 180 immediately. And it doesn't go through. So the results are pretty damn clear. The 45-degree blade is much better than anything else, except the pointy blade, which is about equal, and of course also 2 45-degree blades. The 30-degree blade needs about 50% more height, and the flat blade needs about 50% more height and double the weight. So it turns out the people back in the day kind of knew what they were doing. So let's test the difference between double-sided and a single-sided edge. And there were quite some blade designs that you guys were curious about too. To test this, I want a measuring scale under the sausage holder to measure the cutting forces. And then I want to be able to move the knife down slowly at a constant speed. So some kind of screw mechanism, possibly with a motor. And at that point, I realized that I basically designed a 3D printer frame. So I asked Bamboo Lab if they wanted to sponsor this video, and they did! They sent me their A1 with their automatic material system light, and whoa! From my old printers, I'm used to endless troubleshooting, but this thing just worked, and fast, and no more running around with SD cards, even though you still can. And it has a built-in camera to monitor your print remotely, automatic bed leveling, automatic nozzle cleaning, automatic resonance compensation, and best of all, multi-material printing. It really has lots of features that I didn't expect at all from an entry-level 3D printer. And also some little things. Swapping out the nozzle can be done while it's cold, without tools. Bamboo Lab's best deals run until December 3rd. Find out more on their early Black Friday page to get the biggest deals of the year. In order to drill holes in the same spot for all the different knives, I printed this 2-color jig that lets me put a pin in one of these holes to stop the blank at the same spot. Then I printed 2 angle jigs to hold the blades at 15 and 30 degrees so I can give them a first bevel on the bench grinder. I used the same 2 jigs on the diamond stone, after which I stropped the blades. When you want to compare a double-sided bevel to a single-sided bevel, you can just extend one side, but the bevel angle would halve, which, I mean, that sounds kind of unfair, right? So I think you could reasonably make an argument that you should keep the bevel angle the same. So I did both. Then some more prints. So first we have the sausage holder. We'll put the sausage through here. These are 2 pieces. I can break them. And we will hold them together with some clips. And here there are some feet. And I will put them on a scale. And these feet are there to make sure that it doesn't move sideways. Yeah. And then we have the beam. And this beam will hold the knife. It has some threaded inserts together with these special nuts that will hold the beam in place, like so, straight to the frame. Oh, and these are the clips I was talking about. They are printed in a flexible filament and pull the mount tight around the sausage. Alright, time for the first test. After fiddling around a little bit and an accidental release and a misplacement of the sausage holder, it was time to test the 30-degree single bevel blade. It hit an average of 3.01 kilos. Second, the double-sided blade. I don't know if you would call this 15 or 30 degrees. Anyway, it is a little bit worse, with an average of 3.78. And then the last of these 3.
One-sided 15 degrees. Hoppa.
Surely this will stay under 3 kilos, right? But no. In fact, it's a little bit worse than the 30-degree blade with a 3.28. I just couldn't believe this, and I had some trouble sharpening this blade. The burr that gets created on the edge just didn't want to go away. So I tried sharpening again, making sure only to push the knife over the diamond stone. But basically no difference with a 3.23. Okay, I guess I'll sharpen all the other blades at 30 degrees from one side, which is fine, but surprising. Maybe there's more contact between the blade and the sausage that creates friction, but I doubt that would be measurable. If you have theories, let me know. Then it was time to create the other knives. First, user XYZ came with the idea to add grooves to the blade to reduce friction. I don't have the right tools for something like that, but I tried my best, and in the end I think I got something halfway decent. And to my surprise, this performed exceptionally well, with an average of 2.65, under 3. Second, user XYZ one-upped this idea by suggesting to take out the whole blade and just leave the cutting edge, which I thought was a fun idea and pretty similar to the guillotine blade that we looked at in the museum. It performed admirably with an average of 3.05. Bleeblablu suggested micro serrations. I can't make those, but I can make macro serrations with a chainsaw file. This arguably breaks the 45-degree rule I gave, but this is cool, so it gets a pass. And of course I couldn't sharpen this with a flat diamond stone, so take the results with a grain of salt, which was 4.49. Terrible. Next up was the pointy blade. I had to test this one too, of course. Making and sharpening it wasn't so different from the angled blades, but its performance was somehow much worse, with an average of 4.89. This really is quite a steep difference. I have a theory about it, which is that more of the blade's edge is cutting at one point. In addition, a lot of the surface is in contact with the sausage, creating friction, and since I'm only looking at the peak force, these two factors might skew things, but I don't know. The round blade was a little different. The shape was easy enough to make, but sharpening was more challenging, so I reverted back to just doing it freehand, so the angle isn't exactly right probably. So take that for what it's worth. Nonetheless, we can see some interesting things in the footage. This round blade really struggles to cut through the skin at the start, a bit like the flat blade on the big guillotine. It performed pretty poorly at 4.65 kilograms. And lastly, the inverted V blade that you all asked for in the last video. This was an enormous struggle. Getting a rough grind on the bench grinder didn't work because the wheel can't fit into the corner. So I had to use hand files, but then the same problem happened on the diamond stone. I tried my best, but it was basically impossible to get to the very middle. So take this result with a grain of salt too, although it's kind of similar to the regular pointy blade. This can either mean that indeed the geometry is at fault, or that my sharpening on the pointy blade was somehow just as bad as on the inverted V. Anyway, here are the household items.
A book, umbrella, shoes, an old handycam, and a guitar. The basketball. Alright.
First up, the book. I thought it would go through, and Jon didn't. And he was right. We then tried the book in the open position, which looked much nicer, but didn't really make a difference. The umbrella was a little bit anticlimactic. It broke, but didn't really get cut. We hoped that the top would fly off and open, but alas. Here is a shoe! It does not have steel toes. These are just big, regular hiking boots. The first didn't go through, but the second did.
Yes!
Somehow, I can really feel this in my feet. Very uncomfortable to look at. We also cut it in half in the other direction. It was pretty nice to see how an old, heavily used shoe looks on the inside, as normally when people cut things open like that on the internet, they take new stuff. The old broken handycam was a little bit of a letdown. I hoped on some nice footage of the lenses flying around, but it basically did nothing.
Ja, doe het nog gewoon. Zo slecht.
The basketball is the only new object that we destroyed. It was fun to see the air escape right at the start, but talking about destroying new objects, I always hate it when YouTubers just destroy things for shits and giggles, and especially this guitar kinda looks like that. I went to my local high school and bought them a new guitar in exchange for their worst, most broken specimen. It had a loose back, a broken neck, broken headstock, a hole in the side, and an insanely large action. And even though it technically makes sound, no beginner should have the displeasure of learning on this monstrosity. So, conclusions. Yeah, these people back in the day were pretty sharp. It seems to me that a 45-degree blade, sharpened from one side, is indeed the easiest and best blade to make. And the difference is large, except to the pointy blade, which is thick, double-sided blades are pretty bad if your cutting medium can't move. And if you're feeling fancy, there might be some things you could do to reduce the friction, but the results were not super convincing if you ask me. Because it's a small difference that we measured, and it's weird that in my test, the blade with the hole did worse than the blade with the grooves. You would expect the hole to have even less resistance. Anyway, I hope to see you in the next video.